So basically, as I said before, what we've talked about, and I think Murray made the point and he's right, is that this is a world of acronyms in the whole sort of global framework of carbon trading, is this clean development mechanism is designed to allow businesses in developed countries who have an obligation to go into developing countries at a much lower cost, reduce emissions. And what the other key aspect of this is as April has said, is to drive investment from developed countries into developing countries. So if I'm, for example, a large power company in Australia, and I can reduce my emissions by putting new equipment on my facility, it might cost me $30 or $40 a tonne. Where if I go to an old factory in China and I put on some new equipment, it might cost me $2 a tonne. And that will drive investment from Australia into China, it will reduce emissions and will have other consequences. So this is then where we look at, well, what are the projects that are being considered, and are the projects themselves good projects? And a lot of the debate about, you know, these project development mechanisms not being necessarily always sustainable is because of the projects they've gone in. Now, one of the interesting things to look at is when you look at the world and we look at what are the advanced economies, which are in the dark blue there, the European economies in transition. We also have our less developed countries in orange and our least developed countries in red. Now, the CDM has been very successful in driving investment into those countries. And if you look on the screen there, I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but the point here is that nearly all of the investment in these sort of projects has gone into the less developed countries. So Brazil, India, China, Mexico. To a large extent, the least developed countries have actually been bypassed. So countries, particularly Africa, various parts of Asia and Latin America have really not benefited very much from the CDM. And so one of the things, and part of the reason for that is because if you're investing in a project in a least developed country, there are a lot of risks associated with doing that. And so the investment hasn't really gone there. So one of the key things looking forward is how do we use these mechanisms to drive some of that investment into the projects we're talking about in the less developed countries into the least developing countries. And that's a key objective. In terms of just looking at some of the projects that we've been involved in to date, this is similar to what April was talking about. This is a cook stove project, which we were doing with JP Morgan in Uganda. And the traditional approach really was that you had, within a house, you basically cooked through a 3-stone fire with wood that was collected from forests that had been chopped down. And so this resulted in diminishing forestry reserves. It meant that the fire in the house was very smoky and very inefficient, very poor for health and respiratory issues. And as it was women spending most of the time collecting firewood and also in the home, it was having a disproportionate effect on women as well. What this project did was to take a cooking stove and by using charcoal in the stove, it actually reduced emissions by about 30 to 60%, which was about 1.5 tonnes per household per annum. It leads to a much healthier environment within the home. It also leads to a decrease in deforestation. And so overall, you get a much better outcome by shifting from using sort of 3-stone forest fires to in-home fires to using these sort of cook stoves. Now, one of the questions you might ask is, that is a good transition and as a good example of a project, why not go to solar? And some of the experience has been with solar is that if you put solar on a house, very quickly the equipment's gone within a few days because people take it to either use for other things. And one of the projects we worked on where they did install in a local village a solar facility, the only way they could keep the solar facility there was by connecting it to a television. And every Saturday afternoon, the football came on the television and all of the local community came to watch the football. And they knew that if they took the solar panels away, there'd be no football. So it had a dual effect of providing energy, but also having the incentive of providing television. Another big area where a lot of these projects are very sort of happen a lot is in the forestry area. This is another project we did in Tanzania, which was originally done with the World Bank, but we also did it with somebody buying the credits, and it was an area of land that was fairly much abandoned. The farming practices had damaged it greatly. There was very limited firewood, there was limited employment, and the fertility of the soil was going down. So by putting in place a reforestation project, what it did is it created local nurseries, it gave the groups there a purpose. they could plant trees and other things. And ultimately what happened was these trees, the carbon absorbed by these trees was measured, and then it was sold on the international carbon market. So again, it's an example of where the carbon was used from growing these trees to trade on the market.